Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Israeli forces kill Al Jazeera correspondent Anas al-Sharif and 4 of his colleagues in a targeted strike on their media tent near Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City. Israel claims al-Sharif was a Hamas cell leader, while rights groups say he was targeted for his frontline reporting. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says he has no choice but to take control of Gaza City to defeat Hamas and free hostages, promising the new offensive will be completed fairly quickly. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council hears fresh calls for a ceasefire and more aid to the Palestinian enclave. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the country will recognise a Palestinian state at the United Nations General Assembly in September. New Zealand's Foreign Minister says that the country is also considering recognition, with a decision expected before the Leaders' Week at the UN. 2 people die and 2 are injured in a Ukrainian drone attack on Russia's Tula region, which also targets Moscow and oil refineries deep inside the country. This comes as Russia launches new strikes across Ukraine, killing 6 and wounding dozens as frontline fighting intensifies. US Vice President J.D. Vance says any peace settlement between Russia and Ukraine will likely leave both sides unhappy as President Trump prepares to meet Vladimir Putin in Alaska on August the 15th. Ukrainian President Zelensky insists Ukraine will not cede territory, despite reports a ceasefire could require land surrender. President Donald Trump pledges to evict homeless people from Washington, D.C. and jail criminals as officials prepare hundreds of National Guard troops for possible deployment. The move, opposed by the city's mayor, follows similar actions in Los Angeles amid immigration protests. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says a senior IAEA official arrives in Iran for talks, but no nuclear site visits are planned. Inspectors have been denied access since US and Israeli strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities during June's 12-day war. A magnitude 6.1 earthquake hit Turkey's Balıkesir Sur province, killing 1 person and injuring 29 and collapsing 16 buildings. The quake strikes at 7:53 p.m. local time and was felt across multiple provinces, including Istanbul. Now we start this hour in the Middle East, where 5 Al Jazeera journalists have been killed in an Israeli strike near Gaza City's Al-Shifa hospital, according to the broadcaster and Gaza's health ministry. They were in a tent for journalists at the hospital's main gate when it was hit. Al Jazeera has described the attack as a blatant and premeditated assault on press freedom. The Israeli military confirmed it targeted correspondent Anas al-Sharif, alleging he led a Hamas terror cell, but did not comment on the other journalists killed. 7 people died in total. Al Jazeera's managing editor said al-Sharif was an accredited journalist and that the only voice for the world to know what was happening inside Gaza, where foreign media are banned. Al-Sharif was 28 years old and had been posting online just before his death. The IDF says it has intelligence linking him to military activity, while Al Jazeera insists he was targeted for his reporting. We're now joined by Shruti Dasgupta, who's a Middle East affairs expert. She joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Shruti, as always, for joining us on the programme. Shruti, the Israel-Gaza war remains the most deadly conflict in history for journalists. Local sources have stated that 237 journalists have been killed in Gaza since the war began. Obviously, international press are not let into the Gaza Strip to report facts independently. What are your thoughts on the death of the Al Jazeera journalist, Al-Sharif, and the possible discourse around that, and also the responsibility that the IDF might hold?
Greetings. From what I understand is the human cost of the Israel-Gaza war has been climbing very high, and the recent actions of Netanyahu and his forces will probably lead to this number skyrocketing in the next few hours, if not the next few days. Now, coming down to this Al Jazeera journalist, I do understand that the IDF has taken out a post on all social medias, and they have provided his military ID number, the date he joined Hamas, and his rank as well as his association with the entire force. So when they are providing these kind of evidences, they're providing you photographs of him in military gear as well. I do believe that the press badge does not kind of save that person from facing the consequences of being an Hamas operative. Of course, this is not independently verified. This is what the IDF is saying. And the Al Jazeera's point of view is that no, he was an accredited journalist. So now we need an independent body to come down and look at what the evidence is saying and then define whether this was a strike against Hamas or a journalist body. So this is a neutral point of view. But apart from this, it is really sad that the hostages are now going to be held at gunpoint, probably because of the death of these particular people by the Hamas themselves. So the cost of war is not just going to be paid by the Gazans, but by Israeli Jews as well.
Yes, Shruti, of course. Critics argue, obviously, that the fact that Israel has banned foreign journalists from reporting in Gaza creates an environment where Palestinian journalists become only the witnesses, making them even more vulnerable to attacks. How does Israel respond to these accusations that this policy undermines transparency when reporting on this conflict?
Well, because this is an urban conflict zone, there is going to be a large amount of collateral damage. When you allow journalists who are chasing the latest breaking headline, they try and get as close to the line of action, and that would lead to a larger number of casualties of innocents. So I can justify their banning external entities from being part of this casualty zone. But also, we need to know as a world what exactly is going down in that particular zone where human rights are constantly being tested, and Israel's intent behind that entire conflict is being observed very closely. So we need neutral people out there. But unfortunately, anybody who goes down there is putting their lives at risk. Any life lost, imagine an American journalist losing life there, and the consequences and via a Israeli bullet gone astray. The consequences would be very bad for Israel. So I understand their reluctance to allow neutral bodies in, but it also kind of sends the message that they're controlling the narrative of the place and they are not allowing the truth to go out. And this in itself is very damaging for Israel and their war. It makes them look as an aggressor that wants to silence the truth. And for how large is this part of their entire protect the journalist or prevent false narratives from going out, going to harm their own cause is something they have to analyze, and they have to come out and face the fact that there have been probably more unjustified actions there in that region than they can possibly justify by shutting down journalists.
Yeah, Shruti, yesterday Benjamin Netanyahu held a press conference in Jerusalem where he was asked a question about this, and he said that Israel have decided to let international media in. However, it will only be accompanied by the IDF. Obviously, Benjamin Netanyahu's press conference yesterday was mainly around obviously pushing forward this new military campaign, but also attempting to debunk some claims that international media are making about starvation in Gaza. Having these journalists led by the IDF, do you think that is going to improve Israel's public image, or do you think that this is just lacking more transparency in this regard?
Well, the path that these journalists would take would probably be controlled by the IDF. Some of it would be based on the fact that that is a conflict zone, a Hamas heavy territory where loss of life can probably be pinned on IDF, so they would probably not allow people to go in particular zones or interview a particular set of people. So this is controlling the narrative when you're saying the IDF will tell you where to go, whether they go as security forces or not. But it is true that it is a conflict zone and lives are at stake. Now, independent journalists would risk their careers as well as lives to be there and report something that has never been seen before. But the neutrality of their narrative will depend on which publication they're writing for as well. So we have to take into account the media bias as well as the IDF's bias when this comes around. When Netanyahu says that international journalists will be permitted, they will be permitted in zones where he thinks it is going to be safe for whatever he wants to project and wherever he can guarantee their safety. If another journalist on his watch loses his life while he's conducting these international media circuses, then he would end up looking really bad. So it is not going to be free reporting, definitely. But how much of the truth can those journalists come through? I hope there is much more than it has been reported up till now.
Shruti Dasgupta, thank you very much as always for joining us. Pleasure to get your insight. We now move over to a related development in the Indo-Pacific, where Australia will recognise a Palestinian state at the United Nations General Assembly next month. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has confirmed the move, he said, is based on the commitments from the Palestinian Authority to demilitarise and hold elections. Australia will work with the international community to make this right a reality. The announcement comes as France, Canada and the United Kingdom have also pledged to recognise a Palestinian state amid growing condemnation of Israel's military campaign in Gaza. Let's listen in to what Anthony Albanese, the Australian Prime Minister, had to say.
Today I can confirm that at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September, Australia will recognise the state of Palestine. Australia will recognise the right of the Palestinian people to a state of their own, predicated on the commitments Australia has received from the Palestinian Authority.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called such moves by Australia and European nations as shameful as his government pursues plans to militarily occupy the entire territory. We're now joined by Selina Ryan. She's a political analyst and she joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Selina, for joining us here on the programme. Pleasure to speak to you. What are your thoughts on this growing pressure from international governments to recognise a Palestinian state? And what effects do you think it will have on the people of Palestine and the ongoing war and also pressure on Israel, of course?
I think, first of all, there is no Palestine, so I don't see any point to talk about such a statement. One doesn't exist. I don't think a recognition like this will bring anything into effect. There's countries that have recognized such a state of Palestine 50 years ago. Nothing has changed, nothing has made a difference. I think that all these countries, everything they're doing right now is literally rewarding Hamas terrorism. They came out and they said that these are the effects of October the 7th. Look, now consider recognizing the state of Palestine as an effect of October the 7th. So basically they're rewarding massacres. I don't know if this is the path that Europe wants to take and the world wants to take in recognizing massacres as something positive that should be rewarded. We also saw in Australia, I think last week, a huge protest. And it wasn't for Palestine or for Gaza, how they wanted to sound. In Sydney, it was on a bridge in Sydney. It was literally a protest for terrorism with flagged terrorist organizations. So if this Australia stands for today, I don't know. I don't know what they wanna obtain with it, but yeah.
Selina Ryan, thank you very much for joining us. I do apologise there to our viewers. We had some network issues there with Selina. Hopefully she will join us once again soon. We now move on to another related development. At an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council, ambassadors warned Israel about risks of the expanding of Israel's military offensive in Gaza. China's permanent representative Fu Kong said Beijing firmly opposes any attempt to occupy Gaza, urging Israel to halt what he called a dangerous move and warning against altering the territory's demographic or political structure. Meanwhile, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs Director Ramesh Rajasingham said the following.
Humanitarian conditions are beyond horrific. We have frankly run out of words to describe it. Whatever lifelines remain are collapsing under the weight of sustained hostilities, forced displacement, and insufficient levels of life-saving aid. Hunger-related deaths are rising, especially among children, with severe malnutrition. Since the escalation of hostilities in October 2023, the health authorities in Gaza have documented the deaths of 98 children from severe acute malnutrition, 37 alone since the 1st of July, just over a month ago. This is no longer a looming hunger crisis. This is starvation.
During the emergency meet, the United States representative supporting Israel stood against Palestinian comments and other allies. Let's take a listen in to the US comments made during the meet.
The truth is that this war could end today if Hamas let the hostages and all of Gaza go free. Remarkably, instead of pressuring Hamas, members of this body have encouraged and rewarded its intransigence, actively prolonging the war by spreading lies about Israel, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and the United States, and by handing propaganda victories to.
The pressure should not be placed on Israel, who suffered the most horrific attack against the Jewish people since the Holocaust, but on Hamas, in order to demand the immediate and unconditional release of our hostages. Yet, in a complete inversion of morality and logic, this body has urgently convened to chastise the one democracy in the Middle East, the nation standing on the front line of the battle against radical extremist terrorism.
Israel proved long ago it does not care about the Charter, international law, or the resolutions of this Council if not accompanied by consequences. These facts have led many to rightly wonder, how on earth is Israel still allowed to sit around this table and in these United Nations? If it was another country, you would have been imposing sanctions long time ago.
We're once again joined by Shruti Dasgupta to discuss this further. Shruti, as Benjamin Netanyahu was speaking yesterday, we saw this United Nations Security Council meet, an emergency meeting. As we can hear and as we can see from both the media and these organizations, pressure is mounting on Israel like never before. However, one country stands by them, and that is the United States, both at the United Nations and also President Donald Trump. Can you analyze the United States' stance in this conflict a bit more for us?
Well, United States is the big brother for Israel, and Israel very heavily lobbies. I do not know whether your viewers understand this or not, but US allows political lobbying. That means favors granted for political power. So Israel does very heavy lobbying in terms of politicians and their sway in United States themselves. They also, a lot of Israeli companies sponsor a lot of academia happening in US itself. The only nation that surpasses the amount of money spent by Israel in lobbying in USA is Qatar. So this is how Israel is able to continue to have sway on the US policies regarding Israel and its actions. Now, if I move beyond this and I say that there is also a large cooperation between tech industries between Israel and USA, there's also shared interests between USA and Israel, because Israel does not want a complete Arab dominance while being in the Middle East. So they want survival, and USA finds Israel as a very convenient excuse to ensure that the Arab powers are kept under a certain threshold to ensure that the US influence continues to guide the policies of the Arab world. So it's all about energy, it's all about critical minerals, which are very abundant in the Middle East. And Israel is there, and it's used very conveniently by the USA to ensure that these nations are always on the back foot while signing probably unequal policy agreements with the USA and the rest of the world. For Israel, having USA as the big brother helps because they are a giant military power, and as of now, they are uncontested in the multipolar world for their military dominance. And they come whenever Israel calls, whether it is combating with the Yemen, combating with Iran, as we recently saw, or even with Lebanon and the Hezbollah. So they have veto power in UN, so they can help Israel more than just political lobbying itself. So the USA plays a very giant role in how Israel is able to act in the world.
Thank you, Shruti. We're also joined by Selina Ryan once again. She joins us live from Tel Aviv. Selina, as we've just previously discussed, pressure is mounting on Israel like never before, especially due to some of these claims and statistics that are coming from humanitarian agencies of malnutrition, mainly of children starving in Gaza. According to the United Nations, 12,000 cases of children under 5, the highest monthly figure on record. We saw Benjamin Netanyahu speak yesterday. He showed images to his crowd and to the press and said that there is no starvation in Gaza. He did say that people of Gaza needed aid. However, what are your thoughts on the claims that there's a huge escalating problem of malnutrition in Gaza, and also Benjamin Netanyahu's claims countering that?
Hi. So as I said, like with you yesterday, there is no starvation in Gaza. I was there with my own eyes and I saw the aid that's pouring into Gaza. There is no starvation, and all these pictures with the children that we saw, it's manufactured, or it's children that suffer from unrelated conditions, muscular conditions, or brain palsy, like cerebral palsy, like even Netanyahu said yesterday. You can see it's not by seeing the children themselves. You can see the child sitting next to a healthy brother or a healthy mother or overweight parent. This is not starvation. Starvation doesn't pick and choose. And also, you spoke about 12,000 cases of malnutrition. Where does the United Nations get their information from? From Hamas. This has been a propaganda started by Hamas, and they're also speaking about it. They're not even shy in saying that they're faking this propaganda to Mount Rushmore as well. So I'm not sure how the world still doesn't see beyond Hamas's lives.
Yes, Selina Ryan, thank you very much for joining us. We now move on, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has also said that the IDF has been instructed to dismantle Hamas strongholds. He has said that there are 2 remaining Hamas sites that are now on target. As part of the Gaza takeover plan, Netanyahu also outlined a 3-step plan to increase aid in Gaza. He mentioned inclusion of designated safe corridors for humanitarian aid distribution, as well as more airdrops by Israeli forces and other partners. He said the plan would also include increasing the number of safe distribution points managed by the controversial US and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Meanwhile, UN ambassadors have condemned Israel's plans to take control of Gaza, as the Israeli Prime Minister insists it is the best way to end the war. He also claimed Israeli hostages held in Gaza were the only ones being deliberately starved, and denied Israel was starving Gazans. We are once again joined by Shruti Dasgupta. Shruti, of course, this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and Benjamin Netanyahu's comments yesterday say that there is no intention of starving the population of Gaza. However, statements from some of Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet has said otherwise. The likes of Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich have said in Parliament that they plan to occupy Gaza completely, and have also criticised the flow of humanitarian aid into the enclave. What's different about what's going on inside Israel, inside the Israeli parliament, along with Benjamin Netanyahu's close circle of ministers, and also what he said last night to the international press?
So when he began his Gaza conflict, his Gaza adventures, Netanyahu had the undivided support of all of Israel, including his opposition parties. But as the human toll increases and the loss of lives of Israeli hostages held by Hamas is becoming more and more important as part of the conversation as compared to elimination of Hamas, we are finding that the opposition is gaining ground, not just in the political forums of Israeli parliament, but also in the cities and streets of Israel. And this is what these particular statements reflect. But I would also like to draw your attention to the fact that the UN report itself on UN aid to Gaza says that from 19th May to around the 4th of August, only 88% of the trucks, 88% of the trucks were intercepted by Hamas. That means 88% of the aid that was being sent by UN was never reaching Gazans. And when this figure comes close to August 10th, this figure has now reached close to 90%. So any UN aid that most of us analysts have been saying, the Gazans are starving, there's no doubt about that. But who is exactly starving them? It is the Hamas, because it looks good for them. They are able to put pressure on Israel and make Netanyahu and his team look like the monsters who have starved billions and billions of people, caused lots and lots of life loss, and are only interacting with power dynamics in relation to Gaza. So they have these kind of narratives, and especially the words that are coming out of the opposition parties from Israel is helping Hamas, because it is now putting Netanyahu in the gray zone rather than helping him kind of justify the end of Hamas. And Hamas is very happy with whatever is happening, because it puts pressure on international bodies to recognize it. We have seen large number of nations coming up and standing for its cause. So Palestinian cause gets acceptance, Palestinian cause gets popularity, Palestinian state gets recognition, and the Hamas, despite having lots of losses, Gazans, despite being starved, almost going to extinction, get exactly what they wanted out of the October 7th attacks. So they are being rewarded, as the other panelists had been saying, that they're being rewarded for the October 7th attack and the loss of lives of Israelis thereafter. So it's really complicated.
Shruti, you are right, it is very complicated. There is, however, no verifiable evidence, solid evidence coming out that Hamas has been linking aid. In fact, a USAID review of last month said that there was at least 44 incidents were directly or indirectly attributed to Israeli military actions to the looting of aid, and it also said that there has been no significant evidence that Hamas is looting a significant amount of aid, with no instances directly linked to Hamas. There was also, of course, a anonymous Israeli military official statement to the New York Times, where several unnamed officials reportedly told the outlet that no evidence exists of Hamas routinely stealing US aid. How does one go about navigating the different reports, different claims about this conflict and such an important topic that affects so many starving people amid this humanitarian crisis?
So exactly how you stated, it's very there is no balance in narrative. We know that one report tells us that it's the Hamas that are looting, the other saying that the IDF is shooting on people, and there have been a large number of casualties where suspected Hamas operatives were used as a cause of shooting while people were trying to seek aid. So we do not have balanced narratives as far as that is concerned, but we do have one or two, let's say now, video evidences where we see starved hostages and really healthy Hamas operatives, or at least the hand of a really healthy Hamas operative. So at least Hamas is not starving. And if they are not starving, and Gazans are, as we've had photo proofs, so it shows that at least, if not all, a large amount of aid is being subverted into places where it would make sure that the optics of war favor Hamas's narrative more than the Israeli narrative. So I would tend to believe more of the aid question, that the Hamas are benefiting more than the narrative that the IDF is deliberately starving Gazans. They are starving Hamas. Gazans are and unfortunately bilateral or collateral damage that is happening.
Yes, Shruti Dasgupta, thank you very much for joining us. Always a pleasure talking to you. We now move on and over to Europe, where the US ambassador to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization says it is possible for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to join this week's US-Russia summit in Alaska as European leaders press for Kyiv to be involved in talks. Matthew Whitaker told CNN on Sunday that no decision had been made, but no deal can be made without agreement from all parties. The summit between President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin has drawn concerns that excluding Zelensky could lead to Ukraine ceding territory, an idea rejected by the European Union. Zelensky has held calls with 13 world leaders in recent days, while German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said he expected him to attend. We're now joined by Madhav Nalaput. He's the editorial director of the Sunday Guardian. Thank you very much for joining us here on the program. Madhav, we only have a couple of minutes left. However, your thoughts on the risk of this conflict if Zelensky is not involved in these talks in Alaska on the 15th of August?
Look, if Zelensky is involved, the talks are going to go nowhere. And I'm not sure that President Putin is going to come to Alaska if he knows Zelensky is involved. Given the relationship between the two, Putin and Zelensky, I don't think Putin will come to Alaska if the Americans invite Zelensky, which is why President Trump had clearly said that Zelensky is not invited. Otherwise, there is no way of getting Putin there. So it's either one or the other. Either Trump gets Zelensky to come to Alaska, or he gets President Putin to come to Alaska. You can't get both. And frankly, the Europeans and the Ukrainians are submitting proposals which are unacceptable to Russia. Now, if this is the way things are going, there's not going to be any agreement at all on this particular situation, and the suffering of the people of Ukraine is going to continue.
Yes, Professor Nalaput, thank you very much for joining us. You are staying with us. Russian shelling and drone attacks has killed 6 people and wounded dozens across Ukraine yesterday, while Kyiv struck 2 oil refineries in Russia. Authorities say the dead were reported in Donetsk, Zaporozhye and Kherson, with 19 people injured when a Russian glide bomb hit a bus station in Zaporozhye. 3 beachgoers were also killed in Odessa after triggering a sea mine. Ukraine says its drones damaged refineries in Russia's Saratov region and the remote Komi Republic, as well as killing 1 person in Saratov. Kyiv says the strikes aim to weaken Moscow's oil and gas revenues and claim to have retaken the village of Bezalakia in the Sumy region. The attacks come ahead of Friday's planned summit between Presidents Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in Alaska. That is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you for joining us.